It's posted on the site. Well, it doesn't make any difference.
Continue with the rest of the supervisor's meeting and go to item number 5, discussion and possible approval of ordinance number 1-2019, a zoning text amendment, amending the definition of political signs and adding regulations for place signs in the R3B Flexible Design Conservation District.
So I'm going to start by just introducing some exhibits. Because this is an amendment to the township zoning ordinance, the township has to follow state law, which is the municipality's planning code. And there's various review processes that must be done before the board can come to this public hearing. Tonight is a public hearing, and it had to be advertised in the Daily Local News. It was advertised on February 4th and February 11th, 2019. I have a proof of publication that I've marked as Board Exhibit 1. The second exhibit, because I only do a summary of the ordinance when we do an advertisement because of the cost, we have to send a certified copy of the ordinance both to the Chester County Law Library as well as to the Daily Local News. I did that with correspondence dated February 4th, 2019, and that letter, both of those letters, I've marked one as Board Exhibit 2 and the second as Board Exhibit 3. The Chester County Planning Commission reviews all proposed zoning amendments, and we send it to them at least 30 days in advance of the hearing. This ordinance originally was a standalone. There are 2 different topics that are covered, and there were 2 different ordinances that were sent to the county planning. And then for purposes of a hearing, we combined them and then sent it back to the county planning. So there's actually 2 different review letters. The first was November 14th, 2018. I've marked that Board Exhibit 4. The second review from the county planning is dated February 6th, 2019, and I've marked that B5. The last exhibit is minutes from the West Goshen Township Planning Commission. They reviewed this ordinance on January 8th, and the motion was to recommend that the board approve the ordinance. There are 2 topics covered. One is to address political signs, and there are obviously First Amendment concerns about regulating political speech, and this ordinance is intended to only address political signs within the township's legal right-of-way. If it's on private property, then the township is not going to be getting involved in regulating those signs. The second amendment deals with the R3B district, which is the Drakian property primarily, actually only, and it came as a request of the applicant who is currently in the process of building. They had specific signs that they were interested in constructing at the entrances to their development. They sought an amendment to the existing sign regulations to address those signs. So that's the purpose of the amendment. And as I said, it has been reviewed by both the county planning and the township planning commission. Happy to answer any questions the board may have.
So I just want to make one comment about the structure of the ordinance. It's simply more of a realignment. The ordinance starts out with identifying political signs first and then the space signs second. And yet once you go to read through after the whereas, they're flipped. So I think from just to be able to follow it going forward, to have the political signs be at the front, the first discussion.
Sure. This will get codified into your code book, and so the sections that we're amending will go chronologically in your code book. So it doesn't matter. I typically do that for my own sanity's sake. When I'm drafting an ordinance and I didn't draft this, I go with, for example, if you're amending 84-1, I put that as my first section. 84-2 would be my second section. So I typically do it chronologically. This was a little, because it was 2 different ordinances, it started out as 2 separate ordinances, and then I had suggested to combine them into one for purposes of advertisement and holding hearings. So we can make sure that we do that in the future, but understand that where these will be placed in your code book, which happens pretty quickly, will be chronologically.
Understood. Thank you.
I would like to make the motion that we adopt this ordinance. Is that in order?
I believe it is. Is there a second?
And then just open it if there's any questions or comments, I guess.
Anyone have any comments? Could you please come to the podium, Dr. White? You'll need to state your name one more time.
Does the board prefer we use the shot clock?
Yes, we will. We should also, yeah, this is something new. We have we've invested in the stop clock so that we could, everyone in the audience could know exactly how much time each speaker has been taking. 3 minutes is the initial amount that they're provided, and it's at the chair discretion to be able to allot additional time if they believe that it's necessary.
Okay.
That's true. Okay, Dr. White.
Okay, Doug White, West Goshen Township. I just have a concern about the size of the monument signs on Pottstown Pike. 90 square feet, I thought it might detract from or be overbearing. And also, another question is, there's a stand of woods between Aram Avenue and the caretaker house, if the stand of woods would be preserved. Thank you.
How about if we take it to it? We'll table that and look into it, your request. Are there any other comments from anyone in the audience? Okay, I just want to check to make sure. I think I had one question I had. Oh, I know. Just because I know how difficult it is for our residents to find information in our book of codes, is it possible just to include the political signs placed outside of the legal right-of-way are exempt from these regulations? I know that I've had a hard time understanding what is a right-of-way. Is there something we can point to, either in this ordinance or make it more clear?
Yes. Ms. Dr. Beck, I have a Rolodex in my office that has all the right-of-ways within the township. So any resident that would want to know what the right-of-way line is for their street, they can contact me, and I have that.
Okay. Thank you. Any other questions from the audience? Yes, Mr. Lombardi.
GSA map also depicts those right-of-ways.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we have a motion. Do we have any other second? So all in favor? Aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? None noted. All right, the next item on the agenda is presentation and discussion of possible redevelopment of the Discovery Daycare property located at 325 North South Place Road.
Good evening, John Jarris, and I'm here on behalf of Accolade Properties LLC. My client is the equitable owner of a 3.8-acre property here in the township located at 325 North Five Points Road, which is probably a driver distance away from the township building. The property is currently zoned R3, which requires a minimum 18,000 square foot lots. Currently, a house uses 6 rental apartments, a detached garage as the owner's residence, and a daycare building exist on the property. It's also my understanding there are several llamas. Is that the plural? Llamas? Llama, and a large amount of junk, for lack of a better word, on the property. Most of the properties surrounding the subject property are also in the R3 zoning district, but most are 10,000 square foot lots and slightly larger, perhaps 14,000 square foot lots. Public water and public sewer are available to the site. My client's preferred option would be to clear the site and create a subdivision with 10 homes on a cul-de-sac street. And I think we're going to see a picture of that. The lots would be approximately 10 to 11,000 square feet each and would require the revision of a 40-foot yard setback currently in the R3 zoning. If requested rezoning to achieve that design would not be favored, and Mr. Craig has put a copy of the proposed lot configuration up on the screen before the supervisors. If requested rezoning to achieve that design would not be favored by the township, then my client would pursue keeping the existing structures and subdividing off one side of the property for approximately 4 lots without a street under existing zoning. Again, that would not be the preferred option. We're here this evening to determine whether or not the supervisors would be in favor of us moving forward to work with the township staff in order to propose a rezoning of this property in order to accommodate the preferred design option you see before you. With me to my left is Mr. Pusey, representing the Accolade Properties, and we also have Matt Bush with us, our civil engineer. We'd be happy to answer any questions the supervisors may have with regard to what's being proposed.
First question I have.
Yes, sir.
is, how old is the house, quote unquote, house that's on the property?
Matt, do you know the answer?
I don't have an answer for that. I would say sometime, I think 1940s, 1930s. It's been renovated quite a number of times. It's been divided up into 6 rental units and basically chopped up multiple times. Quite a state of disarray.
I think if the supervisors can take note, most of the lots surrounding this property are approximately 10,000 square feet. So the proposal is to try and conform, if you will, to what you see surrounding this property. Unfortunately, over the years, the zoning has changed that doesn't permit us to do that without proposing some type of rezoning.
Just wanted to make an observation. When we first met with the applicant a couple of weeks ago, Mr. Webb and Mr. Craig and I, we questioned why the zoning was changed decades ago to make all these surrounding lots non-conforming. Typically, townships do not act to make something non-conforming. We kind of question that, and it way precedes all of us here. So we're not sure what happened decades ago to rezone these to, what, 18,000 square foot lots, I guess is the minimum? And they're all 10,000 square feet, so we don't understand what happened decades ago to make that happen.
I mean, sometimes just speaking from experience, that it may be that a board looked at that and thought, well, in the future, if these homes were demolished and they were to consolidate lots, that they would want them to be a larger size. But if these homes that are there now, you don't see them going anywhere, then I agree with you, declaring them to be non-conforming or having the ordinance have them be non-conforming puts a lot of hurdles on a property owner's rights to do what they want to do with the property. So.
But I've brought a couple applications before this board in the past, and obviously the initial question is the board in favor? We're not asking for anyone to sign off on a dotted line this evening, but does the board favor the applicant moving forward? Obviously, he doesn't want to waste time and effort in doing so, if the board would not be in favor of the concept, if you will.
So I have a question about that one lot that would essentially front that street, which I can't read it from here. Veronica. At some point I thought we may have discussed utilizing that, maybe it was not in that meeting, but that there could be a possibility for another way of moving out of that cul-de-sac. So what will you do with that space if it's cul-de-sac? What will be done with that lot?
We went off of Veronica.
Yes.
That would have a driveway directly off of Veronica to basically infill right in the rest of that neighborhood.
Okay.
And there's actually a lot, you can see on the almost catty corner to that across the street. It almost looks like another 10,000 square foot box that would be another spot. So why this one was carved out on this parcel like this, it's odd, but it almost seems like it should have been part of that initial subdivision off of Veronica. That never happened. So our intention is to have that lot separate from the new private street or the new street off this stuff.
Yeah, that'd be a big improvement to the neighborhood.
Yeah, we agree, Mr. Wakem.
So if I recall some of the discussion in that meeting, one of the things that Mr. Purnell has been raising is the issue of the cul-de-sac and getting our utility vehicles in there for plowing and all those types of things. And I think we were talking about maybe having to expand it.
That's correct.
Okay.
So, based off of that meeting, Yeah, and so Mr. Craig had it shown on the screen. We ran a truck turning template for a fire truck that we've used in other municipalities to show that it could safely maneuver around the cul-de-sac. So initially, a 40-foot radii cul-de-sac was proposed, and we widened it out to a 43-foot radius cul-de-sac in order to accommodate the movement of a fire truck safely. And I think, you know, if we were to move forward with this design, we would certainly coordinate with the emergency services in West Goshen. Like I said, we just used a fire truck that we've used in other municipalities, but we would make sure that that complies with what the
problem
township has.
is the ladder or the aerials.
Right. So I believe this was a ladder truck that we used in this analysis, but every fire company kind of has different dimensions on their ladder trucks. So we would coordinate that with the township to make sure we were using the correct one to ensure that it's a safe design.
I believe Mr. Webb has a question.
Yeah.
Chairman.
Just to clarify, Mr. Cornell, all land development plans, I provided a copy to our fire marshal, Andrea Testa, for her to look at, to see if she has any issues. And she does look at that for the fire trucks.
Also, our public works, if this cul-de-sac be wide enough for the plowing,
Yeah. We have 180 cul-de-sacs. We really want to follow it.
Can I just make a quick comment as well? And I think John mentioned it earlier, but I think it's important to understand that the second non-preferred method to go about this that keeps the daycare intact and has houses around it is a by right use, as opposed to asking for an accommodation by the board. So there's two plans that are technically, you know, they were proposing, and the non-preferred one is by right. So I just think it's important to clarify that before delving into any decision.
And how many houses are in that one, Derek?
I think 4 or 5. Okay.
On 18,000 square foot lots?
Correct.
There it is.
And that would be keeping the existing daycare structure, the existing apartment structure, basically everything that you see there, that's there now.
The less than optimum.
So there would be, you would continue to have a daycare, 6 dwelling units, and then 6 more homes?
Couple of witness trees.
Yeah, I don't think it's being used necessarily as a daycare right now. I don't think it's in operation. The existing building would be continued use as it is right now as a rental property. And probably that there's a converted garage into a home that would be another rental property. The intention at that point would be to sell that off to an investor, not in the business to be a landlord per se. So.
And you're just the equitable owner right now?
Correct. And I'd like to look at the property from the standpoint of the trees too. I think if I remember, there's a couple of witness trees there.
Are we familiar with the established trees?
As far as,
Do we know if they have to,
Historic.
they stay, would they?
do I know if they're historic or not? We'd have to look at the where they exactly sit as far as where the dwellings would be, and identify them and way to move some lot lines around. We have not gotten to that yet.
I think it's worth looking at.
Yeah, do you know what the setback is? Do we know what the setback is going to be between the current property owners that have established residence and proposed?
It would meet the same ordinance, the rear setback line, which is 30.
And are you proposing any sort of, or are you thinking about any sort of buffer between the new and the old houses?
That would be at the discretion of the board and the planning commission, but yeah, most likely, and obviously a buffer along 5 points as well, just because of the traffic.
So you're suggesting that your amendment would have the same area and bulk standards as the R3 except for the lot size? In terms of setback, is that what you're saying?
No, the rear setback, side setback would be the same. We'd be
The same as what? That's what I'm
as
asking.
existing. If you want to call it.
Yeah, that,
Existing in the R3 district?
Correct.
Yes.
That's what I just said. So
But-
you would suggest that the same area and bulk standards would apply to whatever amendment you would propose, except for the
lot area and?
And the front yard, the front setback.
Yeah, let me just clarify that. Okay, so Rick has it pulled up here. Basically, because of the double frontage on 5 Points and the proposed cul-de-sac road, we'd be asking for the setbacks to be relaxed for the rear yard and the front yard, just to provide an adequate building envelope to fit within the 10,000 square foot lots. So the rezoning would apply to the lot area, the front yard setback, and the rear yard setback. The side yard setback we would maintain consistent with the existing R3.
But at the same time, in looking to modify the rear yard setback, we could work in a buffering requirement that would try and address any intrusion in that aspect.
It sounds like there's a lot of issues here. I'm open-minded to it, but I would appreciate some more time before I make a decision as to whether or not we should say, hey, go ahead and expend all your money to see for something that I don't feel fully aware, and I don't think we have the time to be fully aware of.
Understood.
That's just my...
The only thing I would pass on to the supervisors is a reality in that, as I stated earlier, my client is the equitable owner of the property, and he has certain contractual commitments. He's got to jump off one of these cliffs rather soon, and that is either pursue this or pursue the by right. So we ask you to please keep that in mind as you consider.
I would just add to Mr. Fioli's statement that my concern is everyone exiting off of Isabel. It's already a difficult street to navigate, as you know, because you come around by the apartments. You really don't see until you kind of get closer up the hill. So I don't know whether this is a set in stone configuration. I was looking at potential, you guys doing maybe even a double cul-de-sac where things could happen, and exiting out to Veronica to maybe lighten the impact of those homes coming out of Isabel. Just to be thinking a little bit more about existing neighbors and the impact that it will have on them. We're doing work to look for historical trees, so that's why the question's about if there's something that can be preserved in our township. And I would agree that we'd rather have homes there and a nicely set up cul-de-sac or a nice community versus potentially the buyback, or is it called the buyback? By right, okay.
Right.
But I do agree that I think we I'd like to get your recommendation on what you might be able to give us to start a discussion about this so that we could inform you with some of the expectations we'd like to request. And for everyone to familiarize themselves with that area as well so that they feel comfortable in making this decision as well.
The other thing I would like to add is I'm a little bit concerned about the requested setbacks. I know what a 30-foot setback is, and to decrease that to a 20-foot setback for the already established residents in that established neighborhood, it's going to feel very imposing on them when they've had all this open space. And, you know, the 3 stories, I know it's required or by right.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that's good. It's going to be,
Yeah,
it's going to change the feel that we
I think that's an error in
Yeah, it is.
I think that's supposed to be less than 30. Yeah, less than 30.
So,
We're not intending to go above 3 stories, but it's going to be typical 2-story homes.
so there's some feedback from Ms. Dunderback and myself and Mr. Field.
Not just a little more time, just to
Yeah.
get into it.
Okay.
You've heard some
I
of
think
our
we're open to
concerns.
having a conversation.
We're open to having a
going forward.
conversation, absolutely.
Sure.
I'm sure we can, both parties can give and take to get what we.
Understood. We appreciate your time.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next item, now we're number 7. All right, discussion, 7 and 8, yeah. So discussion of possible approval of ordinance number 2-2019, amending the existing administrative employees pension plan. Ms. Camp, once again.
Yes, so this is an ordinance, your pension plans were adopted, were adopted through ordinances. And so anytime there are amendments to pension plans, we have to memorialize that through an ordinance amendment. We did advertise tonight's hearing in the Daily Local News on February 11th, and I sent a copy of the ordinance with the proposed change to pension plans, both to the Law Library and the Daily Local News with a cover letter of February 8th, 2019. This is proposing changes to the administrative and road employees pension plan in order to comply with federal laws and regulations, incorporate amendments that have been made since the last amendment, which was January of 2008, provide for mandatory employee contributions, increase pension benefit formula, accelerate vesting, and permit lump sum payments for accrued benefits not exceeding $30,000 in present value. So I can't speak to the substance of the changes. I was tasked to put it into an ordinance format, so I think somebody else can probably speak to substance.
Certainly. As part of the 2019 budget, during our budget discussion talks, the board had expressed interest in the non-uniform employees contributing to the pension. So we went about in formulating a plan to do so. The police members have contributed for several decades, 5% of their gross wages. So staff proposed to the board during the budget season to implement a 2% contribution in 19 and 1% each year for the following 3 years to get to 5%. Along with the discussions, there was a discussion of increasing the pension benefit from 1.5% to 2% per year of service. Accelerate the vesting. Currently, it takes 10 years to vest, which is generally outside, much higher than 5 years is a general vesting schedule. And if we had an employee who would leave, they could take a lump sum payment not exceeding $30,000 of their contributions only. They do not get any additional contributions from the township. So those are the overall plan changes inside both ordinance number 2 and ordinance number 3. The admin and roads and sewer pensions are identical, so but they are set up separately by ordinance each, so we have to make those changes.
So can I just, does anyone on the board have any questions? Otherwise, I'll get started. I just called out some sections of the plan because as the first year, we didn't really get involved too much in this detail, at least I didn't at the time. So I just want to make sure I understand what I'm reading here. The pension benefit formula that says the monthly benefit to participant as of his normal retirement age shall equal 2% of average monthly compensation multiplied by the years of benefit service up to a maximum of 35.
Correct.
Has that been standardized from the beginning of our pension?
Yes.
Okay.
35 years of service. No. 35 years of service was always the maximum.
Okay.
So once you reach 36, 37, 38 years, your salary is frozen for the calculation, and also years of service is maxed out at 35 years.
So on page 16, I'm looking at Article 6 contributions. And this is an area where I think I am not 100% certain what I'm understanding here. So the Chief Administrative Officer of the plan shall determine the financial requirements. Who is our Chief Administrative Officer who is responsible for that role?
I'm responsible for everything, so to speak.
Okay. So there's a statement about the most recent actuarial report shall determine the minimum obligation of the employer, i.e. us,
correct,
with respect to funding the plan for any given plan year after taking into account any contribution to be made by the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania and any participant contributions.
correct.
Under that, then there's the mandatory employee contribution schedule, which you just defined, which was 2%, is 2% this year, 3% next year, 2021 is 4% to 2025, and thereafter it will be 5%. Okay. So the next section, 6.2, again on page 16, section B, effective January 1st, the employer
shall contribute an amount equal to the mandatory employee contribution set forth in the prior paragraph, which would be the 2%, as a pickup contribution pursuant to IRC, which is Internal Revenue Code, section 414H2, in lieu of the prior mandatory employee contribution. Can you explain that to me?
Yeah, that's all part of the minimum municipal obligation. We revised that a couple of months ago. Actually, what?
Last year?
January.
Yeah, last month.
Last month. With the, it actually reduced the township's obligation for taxpayer funding of the pension because the township employees were contributing now 2%. So there was that offset. So we had to change the MMO resolution to show that shift in cost sharing, whatever you want to call it, the shift from taxpayer funded to employee contributions. So that 2% was then offset inside the MMO resolution to show that change. Because we had already adopted the resolution at the end of last year, 419, prior to the final budget being adopted. With the final budget being adopted, we shifted 2% of contributions to the employee, shifting the MMO requirement away from the taxpayers to the employees. And we will update the MMO we do that every year. So as we go through the schedule through 2022, you'll even see a bigger increase in employee contributions, obviously, and a decrease in taxpayer money needed to meet our minimum municipal obligation for the pension. Just like with the police, they contribute 5%. Every year, the MMO shows a surplus because of those employee contributions. You will see that, well, you actually have already seen it with the resolution you just approved last month.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Do we have a motion to approve? Are we ready to do that now?
I can ask questions maybe before you make a motion.
Sure, actually, no.
Motion second.
We need to make a motion.
Yeah, we make the motion and then we'll take questions.
Is there a motion to approve?
I'll make the motion.
What did the pension committee recommend on this?
All right. The pension committee has no oversight over benefits. That is the purview of this board. The pension committee only oversees our investments. That's strictly their purview.
How much is this? Are these amendments going to cost the citizens?
Actually, after 10 years, the pension funds may actually show a surplus. With all the
No,
contributions.
I believe in the document somewhere, I didn't have it highlighted, but I thought I read that before this amendment could take effect, the governing body needs to have a written document as to how much these amendments are
We
going
had
to
those
cost.
actuarial studies done last year.
But they need to have that, in my opinion, they need to have that in front of them before they would vote on changes.
We discussed this at length during the budget process.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Stuntebeck. I did highlight the exact same 16B, the catch-up contribution. That does concern me. Seems like maybe the law required government employees to contribute before we actually made the changes this year.
No, it does not.
I would just ask, we have these committees and I just feel it's too premature to vote on this. This is probably going to cost the taxpayers quite a bit more money. The fact that when you did approve the employees to contribute 2% starting in 2019, you kind of offset that by increasing the longevity payment by 2%. So I recall the township manager saying, well, the employees are giving up 2% of their money, so we got to make it up somewhere. So we're going to increase the longevity payments up to 2%. So, you know, a lot of these moves are to be more efficient
mindful of the citizens and the taxpayers, and I just don't think there's enough information. I don't feel comfortable that the board did not vote to approve the publishing of the information in the Daily Local, as well as the board did not approve the public hearing for the earlier conditional use. So I'm just troubled by the executive making legislative decisions. Thank you.
There is a buzzer, I'm sorry, didn't know that.
Thank you for your comment, Ms. Worth. All right, do we have a motion? Yes, and do we have any other comments from board members? Okay. All those in favor? Aye.
Because that's ordinance 2. Ordinance 3 is identical. I have the same exhibits. I advertised tonight's hearing, the Daily Local on February 11th, and I sent a copy of the ordinance for public inspection to the law library in the Daily Local on February 9th. It makes the identical changes this time to the Township Sewer Employees Pension Plan.
I'll second that.
Any public comment on this ordinance, 3-219?
Hi, good evening. Thank you. I object for the same reasons moving forward as I did on the previous agenda item. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, anyone else? Hearing none. Sorry. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay. This is 5-0. All right, next one is reports of the month, January 19th, 2019.
Well, good evening. For the month of January, calls for service were 2,094, alarms were handled 65, 2 of them being valid. Accidents, we had 28 reportable accidents and 52 non-reportable accidents. The officers patrolled 22,194 miles for the month of January. Now, I do have a real quick couple things. I put a couple flyers on the back table. One is to remind everyone of the readychesco.org, an app you can get on your smartphone or get the information from the county through email. And then another one is cyber Snapchat. If your credit cards get stolen or somebody gets into your identity, you can contact 3 numbers here and they will assist you with freezing your credit cards. And then is Mackenzie Ward here? I guess not. She came in this afternoon. She is with the Junior Girl Scout Troop 4926. And they are collecting donations for the Domestic Violence Center. They're looking for personal hygiene items, snacks, clothings to give to Chester County Domestic Violence Center. And some of the items that they're looking for are like bandages, tweezers, latex gloves, snacks or juice boxes, goldfish, Cheez-Its, fruit snacks, crackers, toiletries, shampoo, conditioner, wipes, hairbrushes, toothpaste, socks, pillows, pajamas for children, pens and pencils, items of that nature, just so they can give back to the community. And they put a donation box in our lobby. So anything you can do, we do appreciate it. And everyone have a nice evening.
Oh, I have a quick question about that. Box, there's just one box?
It is one box, but if it gets filled up, we will take it back, put it in an area, and then we will call Mackenzie and she'll come pick it up.
I'd like to thank you for your efforts in the North Hill community.
Oh, you're quite welcome. Thank you. So,
I have a question for Captain Stone.
yes, sir.
The thing we discussed earlier before the meeting about that scam, I think the
Yes.
township should be made aware of that.
Yeah, us and East Goshen Police. There was a lady, woman, and a small child going around looking for funds for health conditions. One of them had health conditions, looking for money. It's a scam that's going around, but we did receive a phone call this afternoon from a lady who had them come to their door, and we have very good video. So both agencies are working to locate, see who this individual is. So, and this gentleman here has them on their security camera also. Yeah, he came to their house also.
But I'm thinking, should there be a robocall to the township residents to warn them of the possibility?
So we are working on finding out who these people are. It's a small child and a woman.
What was the man when I was there?
A man. Okay, well, East Goshen had a man and a woman, and we had a woman with a child. So they're coming out. So if you do see them, give us a call right away. Thank you for bringing that up.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. President, are you going to speak on behalf of Andrew Testa, Fire Marshal, first?
For the month of January, Andrew did 26 inspections. She had 4 fire calls and 10 to 4 fire safety trainings, and also had 2 meetings. The inspections were 6 use and occupancies, 2 fire blocking, 7 sprinklers, 5 framing, 2 fire alarms, 3 residential finals, and 1 sprinkler break. And Goodfellow Ambulance had 120 calls in West Goshen. For building, there's a total of 119 permits for the month of January. 26 building, 32 electrical, 2 fire protection, 24 HVAC, 8 plumbing, 7 roofing, 1 zoning, and 10 use and occupancies, 5 EMS, and 4 road occupancies. The estimated cost of construction was $4,514,753.22. And the permit fees were $38,859.92. Thank you.
Thank you for your report. Okay, so now we're going to move on to Board of Supervisors announcements. Ms. Soda, can you start?
Sure, but I don't have any this one.
The only thing I have is to encourage the completion of our historical orders.
You received a 58-page memo from Ms. Camp.
Not yet, but almost.
Almost. We have Ms. McKay's comments and your comments.
Okay, thank you. We're getting there.
I'll share 2 announcements. The first is that on January 31st, I attended the Mariner East Safety Concerns Q&A with Representative Carolyn Comida and Tom Killian, who are working jointly to provide information to residents who are living along the pipeline in their districts. Members from the Public Utility Commission Bureau of Investigation and Enforcement, which is the entity that is holding Sunoco accountable for some of the issues that have been identified, and the Department of Environmental Protection and PHMSA was there. And we had people speaking that had experience in gas safety inspections, regional director from the Environmental Protection Agency for Pennsylvania, the regional director for the East Region of PHMSA, the U.S. Department of Transportation. My takeaway from that meeting is that, this is probably the 3rd or 4th that I've been to, that there's still a lot of concern and a lot of anxiety about this pipeline, as there should be. We have a company who has been identified as making some decisions that have not been necessarily in the best of public interest. And as you all probably know, that we are very limited in our ability as a township to take action against Sunoco. So what did come out of it, though, was very helpful, because the person who did most of the speaking was the gentleman from the Public Utility Commission, as well as the PHMSA person who, in comparison to the DEP really is just worried about our natural resources. They're not going to help you with your well, they're not going to help you with your stream. It's really about what they have to do from an environmental protection point of view. So during that meeting, I learned that PHMSA has a tremendous amount of grants available for local communities to apply to that can provide us, outside of our safety limitation, other ways of having technical assistance, if there are things that we decide that we want to do to inform our community about what to do. You know, being able to bring in experts to provide presentations about information that we've never had one here, I think, in West Goshen, possibly back in 2015. I don't remember if you guys even had one then. And most of the people who are attending are those that are along the pipeline, along Boot Road. But what I also learned is that, you know, the impact zone is a lot farther than we appreciate, I think. And what that means is that there really needs to be some level of communication, and I want to urge this board to consider whatever we think is within our purview. We need to work with Mr. Bruman, our solicitor for the Sunoco issues, about what we could be doing to provide micro information, if it's coming through a newsletter, if it happens every board meeting where we give an update on some information that we may have received from all these companies and organizations that are available to provide us that information, you know, accurate and reliable, and information that we can make available to the township residents if they want to go and seek that information for their own education. So that was the first announcement. The second announcement is that I went to the Sewer Authority meeting, which was on February 2nd. And while we made, you know, they made their typical decisions of paying the bills, et cetera, one thing that I had been advocating for the past 6 or 7 months was to start a process of planning for what happens when the sewer funds that they've procured are utilized to fulfill their commitments to the bond. What the role, the responsibility of the township will be, is ultimately will be inheriting some of that cost. And when the 5 Points Road event that happened over January, during January, it was a wake-up call to me specifically. You know, they had projected some new work that was going to need to be done in the township, and that was put into our budget when we made our decisions around what the rate increase should be. But the issues that we might be facing sooner than we expect, since most of our sewer plant was put into the ground in the late 1950s, early 60s, is that something like what happened in 5 Points Road could happen again in any of our neighborhoods. So this planning committee was decided, it was in that board meeting, they basically voted to dedicate 2 of their staff people, the township, the superintendent of the wastewater plant. And we'll have 2 board members from our board participate in those discussions, so that we're having real-time conversations about what's happening, what's anticipated, working with our engineers. Carroll Engineering will be representing us from an engineering standpoint, and they'll continue to have their HRG. So I see that as a very important step forward, because we really are kissing cousins, stepsisters, brothers, or, you know, we really are linked. We own 60%, we process 60% of the waste is coming from our township. And we need to make sure that our residents are protected financially, and that we can anticipate when we might have some challenges from an investment standpoint. And I'm just glad we're making that step forward. So when those meetings do occur, we will ultimately decide how we're going to handle them. I think there will be some where we work together as a group and have discussions, and then we're also intending to have public meetings. So what we're learning, and as we're deciding our future, will be shared with the public as we're going through that process. And that's it.
Just some quick announcements from both. One is, I know a lot of you have been suffering through our annual pothole season. It's been pretty rough out there. There's some pretty dangerous potholes. I just wanted to remind folks that A lot of the roads, unfortunately, that go through our township are not township roads, they're PennDOT roads. And unfortunately, PennDOT does not have the same level of excellence that we have here at West Goshen in our Department of Works. However, that doesn't mean that we don't care. We're taking any and all calls. We have been in contact with Representatives Comita and Sappy, and they have been very proactive. We did have some temporary fixes for some of the more dangerous potholes that are out there, but as you can see, that's a temporary fix. So just to let people know that please identify any potholes that you see. We're trying our best to work with our state representatives and PennDOT to see if we can get them to address some of these issues going forward. The second announcement, I'm not sure if we should do this during the manager township thing, but there was a change of possible dates in May and next month.
Sure.
We'll wait till Casey has something to say about that. So I'll defer to him. Thank you.
I'm going to make one more announcement, and that is that if you go to this website, there is a place for you to click on the newsletter. And we'd like you to encourage your neighbors, your family members to go ahead on that website so that at least you're getting the electronic newsletter into your email feed. We're not sharing that information with anyone. It's all just specifically so that you can get that information directly from us when we have those letters to share.
I have one final thing in addition to Chris's comment. The number for PennDOT is 1-800-FIX-ROAD. 1-800-FIX-ROAD.
Okay, so let's move on to the next item. Township Manager, do you have any announcements?
I do have several. To get to Mr. Pielli's point, we did previously we moved the meeting in April due to the PSATS conference to April 23rd, which is the following Tuesday, the fourth Tuesday in April. We also have an issue with Election Day here. It's the third Tuesday of May, which we have a board meeting that night, but almost this entire floor is used for elections. So just on the staff level, we're proposing May 30th. We have to have a meeting once per month by law. So we're proposing the 30th, which will be the last day of the month, or actually the second last day. It's the Thursday after Memorial Day. So it should be well enough away from the holiday. We were worried about staff members. We looked at the Thursday before Memorial Day, but we have some absences. So if the board wants to check their concern.
I was going to say, do you need a motion to change it?
I will have to advertise it. So yes, if you see that, absolutely. I'll second it.
I will make the motion that we have with
May 30th.
And Chris is seconding it. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay.
Casey, we checked July yet?
No, actually, I hadn't received input from everybody on the July. I'll look at my emails and see if I got any more.
Because you're going to advertise with me.
Yeah, we have plenty of time to make the advertisement.
You and I can't make that same.
Right, you're looking vacation. Let me put another reminder email out tomorrow and check everybody's schedule.
Okay.
And we'll do one email for all 3 days, so we can change that. The township, through the COG, our Council of Governments, Westchester Area Council of Governments, is working on an initiative to, I'm not sure the date, 2050, 2060, I'm not sure the date, just bear with me, to not put anything concrete into effect, but to move towards 100% renewable energy. We are working on that. They had interviews today with a firm, actually 3 firms, to come up with a plan to do so. I'm not sure how those interviews went. I'll report back in March to see if the board, there is some cost involved. I think between the 7 municipalities, I think the proposal was $65,000 spread out amongst all the municipalities. But I'll report back on that at the March meeting to see if the board wants to participate. And again, it's a very, very, very long-term plan to move to renewables for the township for electricity use. Also, another thing I'm working on with staff right now, Dave Woodward will work with Bill and Rick. There are some grant programs or free to the township programs that will install electric vehicle charging stations. Due to the Volkswagen emission settlement, there's billions of dollars available apparently in grants. So with the board's permission, we're going to pursue those hard. Dave, we're looking at one out front for the public. We actually have 2 employees who have electric vehicles. So we're looking at one in the back and one up at Community Park. Now, it's a fee for service. There should be little or no cost to the township. You slide your credit card, just they have in the borough. Slide your credit card, $5-10 to get your car changed. I will take a motion to apply because the deadline's coming up very quickly.
Any comments from the public? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Very good. Excellent, thank you. And the last thing, due to the impending snowstorm, I close the office tomorrow. We're expecting between 8 and 10 to start, and then...
No, 8 to 10 start.
No, not 8 to 10.
It
inches.
starts.
It starts being not that much, oh my gosh. No, it's not that bad. But then we're going to go into icing at night, so we've actually canceled the parking rec meeting as well. Pushed it to next Wednesday, I think.
I believe so.
We canceled the Caswell and HOA meeting. I was going to be there too. We canceled everything. I plan to be here tomorrow to man the phones, but Public Works will be here working hard all day. Thank you, Jim.
All day and all night.
All day and all night. And hopefully it changes to rain, but who knows anymore? Who knows anymore?
Just curious, so if we don't, say we end up getting 2 inches, like, can't make that up? Come in on a Saturday?
Ms. Ford, I am not going to force my employees to come here and, I've already sent a CTY to tell everybody to stay home in the township.
Have the schools closed?
The school's closed. They closed about 4 hours ago. Everybody's closed.
With all due respect, it's not about the amount of inches, it's about the timing. That's the most important part of any snowstorm.
Most of our employees start at 7. I'd have to turn them around at 8 or 9 to go home, and they drive right into the storm. I'm not taking responsibility
That's why I don't.
of an employee crashing their car because I forced them to commit for an hour, Ms.
If
Ford.
you remember the snowstorm in November,
Yeah.
the schools closed early.
Uh-huh.
Once the schools closed early, all the businesses let out because everybody has to get home and get their kids.
Yeah.
Right.
There was total gridlock. We couldn't move our trucks. We were saying it would take 2 hours for one of our southern trucks to get back here for a load of salt. It just, if people can stay off the roads, it just helps the whole place.
The March meeting, unfortunately, I will not be here. I understand if it's too much of a hassle for the board, but I would appreciate if we entertain a motion of another date for the March meeting.
Certainly.
Sent out that email about a week ago, but I understand we're kind of busy.
We have the fourth Tuesday. Derek, I think, is comp plan.
For March?
March
Yeah,
26th.
March 26th, I think is comp plan.
Well,
27th.
I thought the last regular comp plan meeting was February.
I believe you might
And
be
then we
right.
were taking it to the board.
Let me check with Ray Ott tomorrow for comp plan.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure the final regular comp plan meeting is this month.
Right.
And then we move on to the process of getting it to the board. I think it's actually comes to the
It's for the planning commission.
Planning
The
commission in
commission
March.
for the public hearing.
Right.
Yeah, it's the planning commission in March, and then the
Okay,
board.
good. So the 26th could work.
Actually worked better for me as well.
Oh, very good.
I don't know.
Do you all want to check here? Okay.
Oh, you're not here.
Okay. Do you have some other date that week? 27th, 28th?
25th. 28th is historical.
Oh, that's right. How about the 25th?
Could I make a recommendation that we do this offline?
Absolutely.
10 o'clock, and then
Oh,
rather
oh,
not go back
sure.
and forth.
Do we need to vote on it, though, since it's the next meeting?
I'll get consensus to advertise, so I'll send it, circulate it tomorrow.
Okay.
So the third
Well, there's quite a few dates here, and I don't want to spend time doing that one. We've got multiple other important things we want to cover right now.
That's it for me, thank you very much.
Okay.
Just for the record, I did notify people before my...
Oh, no, I understand. I'm not complaining about it. I'm just saying, let's just not do it here in the meeting. All right.
You have put it
Mr.
on
Craig.
the website too as soon as you change it.
Pardon?
You change it on the website?
Of course, yeah. Mr. Gregg, do you have any stormwater announcements?
I have nothing regarding stormwater. I think I've been also tasked with updating you on the Jirakian project.
Yes.
Woodlands. Just real briefly, the collector road between Phoenixville Pike and Pottstown Pike is under construction. The alignment is pretty much in. All 4 bridges have been constructed. That construction is complete, and the roadway fill is taking place now along with construction. of a number of sedimentation and detention basins throughout the site.
May I ask a question about the referencing, please?
Sure, yeah.
Could I give a piece of paper to Ms. Camp and have her look into this? That 444 acres is registered in a Clean and Green Act 319. So they're getting a reduced tax assessment. And according to my interpretation of the law, which obviously isn't always correct, once that is sold, that property, that should no longer
There's a breach of the
qualify.
covenant, and there'll be
Yeah.
rollback taxes, but that's something the county takes care of. That has nothing to do with the
Well,
township.
I went to the county meeting, the commissioners meeting just last week, and addressed my concerns with them. And then their deputy solicitor said it's a state program. So they
It's
just
administered
monitor.
through the county, because the county deals with assessments of properties. So talk to the county tax assessment office, which my firm represents. I'm happy to take that in a different capacity.
Okay, so yeah, that's a lot of money that rolls back to the township as well. It's 7-year rollback. So if there's money out there that should be, in our bank account for our use, I think we should get it when legally we're allowed to get it. So thank you.
Mr. Webb, zoning officer's announcement, please.
Thank you, Ms. Updike. Zoning, excuse me. Just to let you know, the rental inspection program last month, we did 56 rental inspections. It's been a little later this month, but as the apartment complexes tell me, it will be ramping up in April and May. So we'll be going from there. Zoning hearing board will be meeting here next Wednesday evening. We have 2 hearings, one of which I briefed you guys on last week at our last meeting, and we chose to take no action on that application. And I said that I would bring the second application that was going to take place tonight, which is the drop-in. They are seeking the same relief that they sought through the sign amendment, only it would be in the R3 zoning district. So it would be where Dr. White had said on Pottstown Pike and Aaron Avenue. So they're proposing to do the identical sign there as we'll have it on Phoenixville Pike. So they're seeking relief from the zoning hearing board to do that sign on at that location. So I would venture to say that since we approved the sign ordinance, I don't know if the board would want to take a position on that application next week. What would be the consensus?
No position?
All right, thank you. On March 13th, we will have 2 hearings that evening. We're scheduled to have a hearing for 1205 Farmington Lane, which is zoned R3. The property owner wants to construct a front porch. However, under section 84-13 of the area bulk requirements, they're required to have a 40-foot setback for the front yard. They are only able to obtain 34 feet, requiring a variance of 6 feet. We have had similar applications like this in the R3 zone district, which we took no position on. And again, that would be my recommendation. We don't take a position on that either. That'd be the board's.
Yes.
The next application we will hear that evening will be for 706 East Market Street. That property is zoned C5. The property was the former Yale Electric building that has had some work, has had some demo work done to it and refaced. It did not require land development because they were not increasing the size of the structure. They weren't making any modifications that required land development. Before that project started, the property owner had met with Mr. Craig and I and had emphasized to us that the property was going to continue to be retail in nature because the C5 zoning district allows retail in major uses. However, as brought to my attention through a plan review, Mr. Beswick had reviewed a plan a few weeks ago and brought it to me to sign off, and when I looked at it, it was to put a axe throwing facility in that space. By our ordinance, that is a public place of amusement and is only allowed in our industrial districts. We don't allow that in the commercial districts. Secondly, I reached out to the real estate agent that was listed on the application and was baffled by the fact that no one had contacted us prior to making the application for a permit, and there were leases already executed. And on top of that, he notified me that there was a lease executed for a health center, a fitness center, in another space, which is also, by our zoning ordinance, a public place of amusement, which we don't allow that type of use in that zone district. Between those two spaces, with the square footage, they would require 48 parking spaces. The lot only has 54. However, the owner does own adjoining properties. In the past, our zoning ordinance doesn't allow shared parking. You can seek a variance, which we've had in the past. Property owners seek a variance. The zoning hearing board has granted that. Then there's been a shared parking agreement that gets recorded at the recorder of deeds office. So to me, that's not such a big deal. On top of the building permit issue, Mr. Craig was notified by PennDOT that the property owner never sought a highway occupancy permit, and to this day doesn't have a current HOP permit from PennDOT because they reconfigured the entrance, which required an HOP permit. So at 706 East Market, they're seeking 3 variances. They're seeking a use variance request for an athletic club in tenant space number 3. They're seeking a use variance for a public place of amusement, the axe throwing facility, in tenant space 1. And then, based on the zoning ordinance and the parking issues, they're seeking a variance from the shared parking requirement, and through their counsel has told me that they would agree to do a shared parking agreement and recording that. In my opinion, from a zoning perspective, a use variance has a lot of hardships to prove. In this situation, they're not there. There's hundreds of uses that could go in there. It was retail before, and it could be retail now. In my opinion, I think the board should take a position on this application, simply because if we don't, and we don't take a position, and the zoning hearing board says, you know what, we'll give that. Why do we even have a zoning ordinance that prescribes where uses can go?
Right.
We have to protect the integrity of the zoning ordinance. And not only that, we have other businesses that are similar to this that are not that far from there. So the folks that have done what they were supposed to do, we would be just thumbing our nose at them. And not only that, if the zoning hearing board would grant such a variance, the zoning hearing board is putting themselves in jeopardy of a legal challenge from a business that has done what they're supposed to do in that zoning district. So it would be in my opinion that the Board of Supervisors would send Ms. Camp to take a position on this application on behalf of the township. We need the board to give direction to this.
Motion, I'll make a motion for that.
Second.
Your turn, Mary.
We have a motion and a second. Do we have any comments? Yes, please come to the podium. Please provide your name.
Good evening. My name is Eli Kahn. I'm the owner of 704, 706 East Market Street, the Sherwin-Williams building, and the subject property that Mr. Webb described. We are also purchasing the former Westchester Motors building at the corner of Market Street and Bolmar Street. I'm a Chester County real estate developer for 35 years. I own about 14 retail centers of over about 2 million square feet in Chester and Montgomery County. I will be the first one to tell you that I take great pride in everything I do. Westchester Electric, first of all, let me address the parking issue. Westchester Electric had been in this building for about 40 years, in both buildings, the Sherwin-Williams building and the old Westchester Electric building. There's 2 lots, common driveways. The property has had shared parking for 50 years. Now, Mr. Webb doesn't consider that, I guess, a non-conforming use or an existing use. It has had shared parking for 50 years. Sherwin-Williams and the Yale Electric building have shared the parking for a long time. Happy to go in for a variance. We have more than 4, we have plenty of parking to accommodate retail uses. I did meet with Mr. Craig and Mr. Webb. In all of the retail centers I own, in Westchester, East Bradford, Euclid, East Whiteland, retail use, commercial retail districts typically allow a fitness center, or this is the axe throwing that Mr. Webb is talking about is called Stumpy's Hatchet House. This is a relatively new use. There is already one in the township. It's a recreational use similar to bowling or any other use, like a recreational use. I did not believe those uses would be considered non-retail. If you look at many of the buildings surrounding this building and all the municipalities around it, you will see bar studios, Anytime Fitness. In the West Goshen Shopping Center, you have a LA Fitness. These fitness centers exist all over. These types of retail uses or type of recreational uses, as you define them, are typically found in retail centers. I understand your ordinance says they should be industrial centers. I own millions of square feet of industrial buildings. We typically frown on having residences and non-industrial people in our industrial centers because we don't want tractor trailers backing up into these uses. So I understand what your ordinance says. I am at fault for not realizing earlier that this use was not going to be classified as a retail use, because everywhere else I own a shopping center, these types of uses are retail uses. You have these types of uses in retail establishments. So that's why we're seeking a variance. We have the parking, the issue about PennDOT. If any of you know Westchester Electric, or the old Westchester Electric building, we had about 8 parking spaces that had to back up almost into Market Street to get in and out of the building. We tore down about 10,000 square feet of the building to add more parking in front of the building. Again, I have a little rendering or pictures of what it used to look like and what it's looking like now. I think the building looks great. I'm hoping to do the same thing to the Sherwin-Williams building. I'm hoping to do something similar to the Westchester Motors building. I'm not asking you to accept uses that aren't typically uses that are in retail centers. I'd ask you not to take a negative position and send Ms. Camp to the zoning hearing board, again, because the case we're going to make are these are typical retail uses. This zoning district C5, you have 5 commercial zoning districts. C5 allows retail, it allows personal service shops, it allows laundromats and barber shops and hairdressers. But for some reason it doesn't allow a little fitness studio. It allows car dealers, and it allows a lot of other uses. So as a developer, I was looking at these buildings as an opportunity to upgrade them in the township, and I'm, again, very proud of the way it looks. But, you know, I have this lease signed, and again, if you don't approve the use, then obviously the lease will be in default, and, you know, they won't open here. So again, I ask you to please, I understand Mr. Webb's issue about your zoning, but practically these uses should be in retail centers. And I know you have 5 different retail districts, but and I know this is in the very corner of your township, very close to Westchester. And but again, I'm proud of what I'm doing there, and I'm looking for some relief for uses that I think are very typical for this area. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing your comment. Yes, Word?
Ms. Ward, I'm sorry, we're having some difficulties with our new clock, so I'll give you time to later.
No, this is something I've been wondering for a long time. I thought I read somewhere where the zoning hearing board and the board of supervisors are 2 entirely different units, and it was not appropriate for the board to take a position. Because why would you have a zoning hearing board if you get to hear?
Because the township can be a party in every zoning proceeding. The township has automatic party standing in any zoning application. And it's very common, almost every municipality has their governing body review the zoning applications and decide whether they want to take a position or not.
There have been some municipalities where the township board of supervisors has sued and appealed zoning hearing board decisions.
Well, I would agree with Mr. Khan. I would hope that you'd stay neutral on it and let the zoning hearing board do what they were appointed to do. They've been at it a long time. See what happens.
There's somebody else. There's somebody else. Oh, I'm sorry, yes. Please come forward and state your name, please.
Sure, I'm sorry, I'm not going to waste my time. My name is Ted Clemens. I'm actually one of the Stumpy's franchise owners. I just want to comment that I understand the usage that you guys have in place, and I respect that. I also wanted to explain that we're developing probably 8 of these facilities all over the United States this year, and we have multiple landlords in other townships that are seeking us to take over for traditional retail spaces because brick and mortar stores aren't cutting. So people are really, landlords in general are looking to upgrade to an entertainment to attract people back so that they have some stability in their buildings again. I just felt that important to say that I understand historically retail is retail and our usage as entertainment is a little different and out of the box. But truth be told, we're actually being sought in many territories for our application to be used in historic retail areas. Thank you for your time.
Your comment.
I do have a question. Is it possible to update the zoning code to allow for an explained use?
We have done that. The zoning ordinance is a living, breathing document that can be updated at any time if the board so chooses.
It's something that I had advocated and talked about for a while. I think we need to look at, it's always a good idea as uses change. So for example, we had a hearing on a medical marijuana dispensary. That use didn't exist until Act 116 or whatever the act was called. I mean, it didn't exist. Uses changed, as you said, retail stores, the typical brick and mortar, they're not going to be around. So I do think it's a great idea to look at what not just in your commercial districts, in all of your districts. To look at, okay, well, what are we calling these uses? Do these uses even exist in today's society? Because a lot of them don't. And then what do we want to see? I mean, that's what's so great about being on the board. You get to call out what you want to see happen in what locations. 5 different commercial zoning districts is I want to say it's totally unique. There's other municipalities that have that. But I think the other thing you want to do is look at what's out there in reality and how are you classifying that use and is it allowed in that district, because you don't really want to have nonconformities if you don't have to. If you're okay with that use being there, then recognize it as an allowable use and don't make it difficult for that use to continue to exist. So that's something that I definitely think, I mean, that takes time to do. And sort of the way we've done it, not just here, everywhere, is as a developer comes in and says, hey, I looked at your ordinance and this is a really great use I have in mind, and it's not called for in this district, can you guys live with it? And then we would have the applicant pay for the cost and expense of having to do an ordinance amendment. So that's how we've done it, sort of piecemeal, but at some point in time, we got to stop doing it piecemeal and sort of look at it holistically across the township and all the districts.
Thank you.
If I could just comment on that comment. This district, just to talk about how things have changed, this district allows, like as conditional use, monument sales. Monument meaning headstone sales. I mean, how many headstone sales establishments have you seen recently? This district talks about retail sales of dry goods, variety and general merchandise, watches and clocks.
Yes.
When's the last watches and clocks?
With all due respect, I think the commentary that we've just shared with you will give us another thought. And
If I may, Madam
yes,
Chairwoman,
yes,
my
please.
concern is that we're talking about entertainment. So entertainment can mean a lot of things, fellas. We really have to be careful. We make an exception with you, and I mean, no offense, you're coming in after not doing the things you were supposed to do. And now you're asking us to make an exception. So you can't expect us not to be careful about this and to consult with our attorney. What would this lead to, as Mr. Webb, I think so aptly said, we have to be careful. Now, I know what your specific use is. It's an interesting use. I think I saw an article recently about it in the Daily Local. Was that you guys? Or it was an axe throwing place. Okay, all right. So it must be in a new rave. But I think you have to understand where we're coming from too. That's my concern. My concern is when we say entertainment, what kind of door are we opening here?
Well, and one thing, this is a complete policy decision, so I'm not advocating one way or the other. One thing you could do to that end is if you chose to take a position not adverse, but made sure that whatever, if the zoning hearing board, because they have a big hurdle. I mean, that's to Mrs. Swartz's point. You know, they're an established board, they understand the law. It's a pretty big hurdle to get a use variance. But if you didn't take a position opposed to it, but had it be specific to these entities, and so that typically, and I don't know if Mr. Conlon agreed to that, but typically a variance runs with the land, and so if the use was approved for an axe throwing place, you could advocate to the zoning hearing board that that's the only use that would be permitted for. So that if they wanted to switch to a different entertainment, a broader category, a different entertainment use, you would ask the zoning hearing board to not allow that and to impose that as a condition. That could be one way to go about it. Now, I'm not suggesting you have enough information tonight to make that decision, but that's one other option.
I have to agree with Mr. Fiali. I'd like, there's an option to update the zoning code to allow for this kind of use. So there's another avenue to go as well as going to the zoning board.
I guess I would just
I'm
feel more comfortable
pointing that out.
if we did have our attorney there and we could play it by ear or so.
But you need to give me specific direction, because I can't go there and not know what my objective is. So I need to know if I'm there monitoring it, am I there opposing it, am I there suggesting conditions, what are we there for?
I'm concerned if we don't, we have to uphold our zoning code, and if we don't, I understand the role of the zoning board is to do that also, but I also believe that we have to take a stand, and applicants can go also, request that the zoning code be amended and go through the correct channels to do it. So there's other avenues to granting this. I'm concerned with what Mr. Webb said, that if we don't really take a stand, we're
inconsistent.
Thank you. We're
Consistent with our application of our own ordinances.
Yeah. And we're, providing favoritism from one applicant to another applicant. We have to be neutral, we have to retain the standard.
So, what's our motion here?
We still have a motion on the second to oppose, period, so.
Not opposed.
Need to amend it
Right.
or
Yeah.
something.
Just need to go through the correct process.
Well, I think because this is the first time I'm hearing about this issue, I don't feel comfortable making any decision right now. I'd rather table it and
seek more counsel and discussion about what our options might be.
The hearing is March 13th, so we meet after.
Well, the only way would be if the applicant would be willing to grant an extension of time for this 8-week-old hearing to allow the board to consider it. So I guess that's a question for Mr. Khan.
Yeah, the application just came in. They actually just gave me the amended application tonight.
So it hasn't been advertised yet? Okay.
I just received the amended application from the attorney. Mr. Greco handed it to me tonight.
So does the rest of the board want additional time to consider it? Is that worth?
And just keep in mind, we're most likely going to push our meeting back towards the end of March, so it would be additional time past the 19th, which was our normal meeting date.
Yeah, well, I think we haven't defined what we're going to be doing in March.
Well, Ms. Camp, since they amended their application and just handed in the amended application today.
60 days runs from today.
Today.
I would agree with that.
So we can hope this hearing doesn't have to take place until
April.
April.
So you could bring this back for discussion. And I would only say to do that if you think that there's additional information you would like. Maybe Mr. Khan considers submitting a proposed text amendment that clarifies and addresses the C5 district specifically.
We've worked with Mr. Collier in
Yeah.
the past on updating.
So maybe he brings back additional information for you to ponder at your March meeting. There would still be sufficient time for them to hold the hearing in April.
I'll withdraw my motion. Actually, it's Chris over there. Do you want to amend or withdraw your motion?
I mean, well, it sounds like we're not going to have that hearing after all on March 13th, correct?
We don't have to have it now.
Okay.
Because we can push it back. I know applicant's counsel was pushing me to have it in February. And I said, no.
But you just got the amended.
Well, they had filed in time that we would have been able to have it in February, but the zoning hearing board already has 2 cases on the docket.
Okay.
And they don't, and not knowing how long those cases are going to be, they'd like to limit their cases to 2 a night if they can. So at this point, if we hold this in April, I'm telling you now, I already have 2 applications that are going to be before them in April already. Because I met with a representative from Chevy dealership today that has to file a sign variance request. And I also, Chester County Hospital is coming back in April for variances for additional signage. So, I mean, those 2 cases should be rather quick, and I think the zoning hearing board will probably be amicable to hearing a 3rd case in April would probably be okay, would be an issue. I did want to bring up sovereignty between the 2 boards. The zoning hearing board does act on their own because they have gone against recommendations this board has made. So just so the public is aware, the zoning hearing board has gone against us on things that we have sought to be in favor of.
So we still have the opposition motion. Mr. Gill, do you want to withdraw it or amend it?
I mean, I feel sort of constricted in decision-making. If they're going to go forward on March 13th, and I still could stand with the motion of sending our solicitor to oppose, because I don't think it's fair that we should make this decision, which could...
Why don't you ask Mr. Khan? It looks like you might have a proposal.
Yes. Listen, the right thing to do is change the zone.
Oh, yes, I'm hinting to you
No.
with your attorney.
No. I'm saying, the issue practically is, will you accept an amendment, or will you consider reviewing an amendment
Yes.
to change the C5 zoning? I'm not going to look at C4, C3,
That's why we need the
C2,
time.
C1.
Yeah.
Yes.
So that is the right way to do
Yes,
this,
that is
and
the
I'd
right
be
way.
happy to ask Mr. Greco to do that. You don't have to advertise the...
Well, you have to put your application on hold, then you have to extend an indefinite.
We would be willing to do that.
In the past, we have received letters from applicants to waive the requirements of the 60-day period from the NPC.
Yeah.
So if you could have Mr. Greco forward such a letter to me tomorrow, I can forward on to the zoning hearing board solicitor as well.
Okay, Mr. Pielli, with that, are you
I
comfortable
would
with
be
John?
totally open with that. I think
Yes.
that's the smart way to go.
Yes.
Okay. So you withdraw your motion then?
I will withdraw my motion if this gentleman's going to do what he just said.
I will do it.
Great.
All right, thank you, sir.
Okay, do we have a second on that motion?
What, to withdraw the motion?
To make a motion so that this can't be.
Going back to the drawing board.
Are you okay with Mr. Fields?
Yes, yes,
I'd
absolutely.
actually like to
Based on the plan.
throw a couple of acts.
And so, actually, it should be that if he doesn't do that.
No, there's no comment on
Yeah, is it possible when you look at that to also look at the medical marijuana dispensary list? Because that's just allowed in all.
That's where pharmacies are allowed.
Well, I know, but the state that, I don't think that's by law, it was their recommendation to allow it.
We are constrained by state law, 16.
So we have 5 different.
We have to allow that where we allow similar use. We felt that pharmacy was the most similar use.
I just thought it was either commercial or industrial. We were free, that was their recommendation.
Okay, I didn't call you up to the podium anyway. We really need to finish the meeting's requirements here for tonight. All right, it's December 14, approval of the Board of Supervisors meeting minutes of January 7th, 2019 and January 15th of 2019.
Motion to approve.
Excellent. We have 2 motions approved, so you're going to be the second, Chris?
Oh, Chris.
So you're Mary first, okay. Yes, so public comment.
Hi, I respectfully request that you do not approve the minutes tonight. January 15th, I made comments on 5 different agenda items. Only 2 were notated in the minutes. And then on the January 7th organizational meeting, there was no mention that I objected to Carroll Engineering as the appointed engineering firm. I also expressed my concerns about holidays that were not approved by the board, but were given as additional holidays. So once again, they're inaccurate, they're misleading. And Mr. Lalonde, give this guy...
Your words are not attacking
No,
me.
I'm not. I'm like, give this guy a break. He's the chief executive officer of the pension committee. He's the clerical... I mean,
So I'm going to
take
answer-
something
I'm
off
gonna-
of his plate.
I'm going to answer your question, and,
Sure.
this is probably the second or at least maybe even the third time I've had to state that our meeting minutes are not verbatim. We are not required to keep your comments. We need to, these minutes, or for us to know what we talked about, what we agreed to, what we voted on.
The sunshine law.
From time to time, your comments are not going to be here. And where they will be is on the YouTube video, which I also said is a source of information that we rely on. We do, Margie.
But
And we're not going to
legally...
edit the minutes every month.
No,
Just because
legally...
you want your name in it.
No, I come here to be on the record, Ms. Stuntebeck.
I understand that, but you are on the record on the
No,
YouTube
they are
video.
not legal documents. The videos of these meetings are not legal documents.
They are comprehensive in covering what was said, what was asked, who came to the podium, and what...
The Sunshine Law requires every time somebody comes and makes public comment on an agenda item, it just must be stated. You can just say Margie Swart objected to Carroll Engineering. That's all that needs to be said. I'm not asking for verbatim. I'm asking for the township to follow the law.
On this. I'm not going to even argue with you about the Sunshine Act, but I think it's fair to understand that we are doing the video so that more people can actually have the transparency of attending our meetings. And what goes into these minutes is relatively thorough, and it's shorthand for what happened. We're not giving all the details of every conversation that happens between a member that comes to the podium. It's not possible. If you're saying give him a break, well, give him a break. He has to write the information down to have someone else sign it.
All right,
And we're not having a debate. I'm finished talking. I'm going to now move on to the next
So can we vote on, may we vote on the motion? I believe we have a motion and a second.
Aye, public comment?
Excuse me.
Come to the podium, Mr. Lawrence.
BoS Roberti. Madam Chairwoman, with all due respect, you're absolutely incorrect, both in fact and in law. I have the copy of the Sunshine Act, which is a governing body. I am absolutely shocked. You have a very competent solicitor, and she's silenced in this manner. It should be noted. You are absolutely incorrect. Educate yourself. This is a copy. I would be more than happy to let you have it. Thank you.
I have the same document, thank you. Okay, so we have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? Hearing none, passes 5-0. Okay, treasurer's report and bills to be paid. Approval dated January 31st, 2019. Do I have a motion to accept the treasurer's report? Okay, we have a motion and a second. Mr. Bernal and then Mr. Meekum. Are there any public comments about the treasurer's report?
I have two quick questions. Still request that the board would form a citizen audit committee, or at least have the elected auditors audit the bills every month. But I'll just point out two that came to my attention. Rental inspection fees, $22,125. Is it my understanding there's $40 per unit rental inspection? Is that what we charge?
You're seeing the total program collected. That includes the annual registration fee and the inspections themselves. That's where that $22,000 is coming into play. So a majority of the funds that have been collected this year were from the the permit that's required of the property owners who rent it. A majority of which has come from the apartment complexes. For an example, last month,
Let him finish, please.
56 times 40, I'm not, offhand, I don't have that. That's what we would have collected in rental, actual inspection fees last month.
Right, so I just saw the $22,000, so I thought, okay, divided by $40 per inspection. I thought, wow, 553 units. So thank you for clarifying that.
Yes.
And then also Vickers Tavern, board dinner. Was that the Board of Supervisors?
It was the Board of Supervisors.
Did you conduct any business?
No.
Absolutely not.
Is that allowed?
They can go do
They
it.
went out to dinner as friends. That was it.
Yeah. Not like they're conducting agency business, it has to be advertised.
Okay.
It's not their meeting.
I would just hope that you would consider next time dining at a restaurant in the township, and maybe one that's not so expensive.
What dinner was this?
Vickers Tavern, it says board dinner, $424.
Reorganization.
Reorganization.
January 7th, reorganization. We went out to dinner.
Okay, thank you.
So we had a motion, we have a second.
Yes.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay.
I'm
5-0.
going to voluntarily table
I just
the
thought I'd
pipeline
ask
safety
you to
grant.
do that.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
All right, so that's number 16 off the list. We'll table.
Yes.
You want to table to March?
Yes.
Okay. All right, what about the discussion of process to negotiate extension of Verizon franchise agreement?
In a nutshell,
Okay.
our Verizon cable franchise agreement is due at the end of 2020. I have worked with my fellow 43 managers in Chester County to go as a group with Verizon to negotiate a single contract. We all have to have separate contracts, but a single endeavor, so we're not wasting our solicitor's time doing it. We have an engagement letter for Cohen Group out of Pittsburgh. They do telecommunications issues. They worked on our DAS ordinance and our work with that.
Very reputable.
Absolutely. You have the proposal. I didn't know 3/4 of these issues that they look at. So I'm seeking approval for the board to enter into those negotiations.
Okay, do we have a motion to all sharing agreement. Okay, Ms. Lasoto made a motion, Mr. Purnell seconded. Are there any questions from board members? Any public comment? Hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Great, thank you.
Okay, we have, last item on the agenda is public comment. Are there any other comments that would like to be made? I'm going to ask Mr. Brocha, we'll go in this direction. I'm kind of podium.
I'm not sure exactly how the chair wants to be addressed because I've never had a meeting
I'm
before.
going by Madam Chair.
Madam Chair.
Madam Chair?
Yeah, if that's okay with
Because
you.
I had put something different in my notes here, and I didn't want to offend anybody.
You're not offending one way or the other.
At last month's Board of Supervisors meeting, Madam Chair stated that Mr. Bertolami said he offered to clear my walk and that I declined the offer. That conversation never took place and is a total fabrication. I sent to Madam Chair a site that verified exactly what I have been claiming for years. It stated that snow throwback is controlled by the speed of the vehicle. Madam Chair was also sent a series of videos that corroborated the claims I have been making for years. The one series showed that the drains were not opened over a period of over 3 weeks. This was a clear violation of the township policy of clearing the roadway curb to curb to open the drains. A video was also sent that showed the snowplow truck did not come close to the curb coming up Sylvan Road until it came to my property. Then suddenly veered in to go to the curb line and throw snow onto my walkway. The only conclusion that can be drawn after watching this video is the act was intentional. Another video showed snow was thrown back on my walkway at the intersection of Sylvan and Warren Roads, where there clearly was room to push it back away from the walkway. Another obvious intentional act. Hopefully now that these videos corroborate the claims that I have been making for years, the township employees that have been violating township policy and endangering the public welfare, and the supervisors that failed to control these acts will be held accountable. Also, I tried to forward additional videos to the Madam Chair that would further corroborate the claims I've been making, but I apparently was blocked from being able to deliver those videos. I tried to send 6 different videos, and it came back not deliverable.
Because I did see everything you sent me, I looked at, every video, including all the audio when you were walking through.
Well, I have different videos to send you then.
Okay, yeah. What I would suggest you do, can you send them to the email address? The email address is bigger than sending it to me on my cell phone.
Do I have your email? Do I have your email address?
I believe I sent it to you when I sent you my contact information, but
I'll
I
check
did
it
not
out.
want to send it again.
I'll check it out.
So one thing I'd like to ask you, if I could, Mr. Brocha, I understand, I think the rest of the board understands the frustration and concern you had about what happened to you back in 2007.
This has been going on for 11 years.
Well, but I think what I'm concerned about is that when you say you've been going on for 11 years, you're saying for the last 11 years they've been doing throwback?
Yes.
Okay, so that's not consistent with what I understand. And I wanted to ask if you could give me an idea of what your expectations are. Because Mr. Bertolami is a very genuine, honest person. And he would like to make sure that you're happy and that we're not doing something to create more havoc in your life.
Well, the statement that I declined the offer is a fabrication. There was no offer made.
Okay, so we have a snowstorm coming this weekend. Would you like Mr. Bartolome to come to your home and check to make sure that your home, you can move out and you're
I just wanted to do the job I'm supposed to do.
Okay.
And like I said, in light of all these things, the videos I sent, I have additional videos and pictures, the people need to be held accountable for letting it go on for that period of time.
Well, we have a change in the board. We've had changes in our employees. I don't think we can go retrospectively back to hold people accountable. What we're trying to do is to create a dialogue with you where you can understand the process that they go through to do their job appropriately. And if you have questions or if you have an issue where you're unhappy with how the result ended, that you have the ability to reach out to them, they're willing to help. They're willing to fix a problem if they created it.
I filed 3 police incident reports over the years since 2012, and I stated at a couple of other meetings, 30 years there was never once one throwback. So how do you account for no throwbacks for 30 years, but then when I complained to Mr. Halverson, and he warned me that it may happen again, and it's happened for 11 consecutive years.
Okay. All right, well, thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Rapano.
Barry, I will keep it short. The rules and regulation in this township and also state law governs the Open Meeting and Sunshine Act. If your solicitor wants to consult with the members, supervisors, she's allowed to do that as part of her job. That can be always done in an open meeting, with the microphones on, or at executive session. She cannot do this huddling among 2-3 people quietly. This is a public meeting. These are taxpayers. The reason they are... May I proceed?
We weren't speaking to you, Mr. Roy. Go ahead.
Well, you're distracted.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Thank you.
Sure.
I have the floor for 3 minutes. These are the public, the member of the public. Their job is to watch the public servant. That's your title. This gentleman, he's a public servant. Gentleman behind him is a public servant. They are the taxpayers. They have a right under the Municipalities Planning Code and Sunshine Act to sit here and observe what you guys doing so there's nothing illegal takes place. Again, I highly recommend your solicitor, if she wants to consult with you, either executive session or an open mic, so we can hear what's going on. Thank you.
Under the attorney rules, I am permitted to give attorney-client confidential communication. At a public hearing where there are legal issues to be decided by the board, there is nothing illegal about having an attorney-client protected communication with the client, and that's exactly what I did. So I disagree with your assertion, and I don't need to hear any more. We're not going to get into a dispute.
Executive
You stated
session,
your point.
that's what for
That's not
executive
true.
session.
Sir, you're wrong on that. It was a public hearing, and I'm always permitted to have attorney-client conversations that are outside of the public forum.
Under professional conduct dictated by the attorneys.
Doug, please come forward. Yeah, he's next.
Oh,
Yeah,
sorry.
here's next. Yeah.
Okay, Doug White, real fast here. Casey, thank you for the great new floor, and the foyer looks beautiful. Also, I respectfully request that the board sometime consider something about storefront safety, a possible amendment to an existing ordinance or a possible new ordinance. I do have samples of ordinances when you're ready for that. Also, third thing, in the back, the docking, we're concerned maybe with possible blasting that could occur right outside the buffer zone in our wells. Just something to think about, and the residents are concerned. Also, it's okay to go to dinner. You guys work very hard. You deserve it. Thank you.
You know, I'm not sure how to proceed it. For years, I've been...
Share your thoughts, please, your comments.
Go ahead.
Three years ago, come in March, Mr. Lalonde, Ms. Camp, Mr. Davis, and I were in a courtroom. For reasons known to them, they understand why I'm tough on Mr. Lalonde.
Margie, I
Circumstances-
just need to forewarn you.
No.
You will not be disparaging
I'm
any
not
of our
going to.
township staff,
No.
making any allegations against them.
3 years ago, Ms. Camp had to write a letter on behalf of this township to the company that my husband was employed with. I have refrained, for the most part, from staying off of public media. I get information from this township because I want to understand my local government. I come here to be on the record. I don't have to come here anymore, and I'm sure that would make you all very happy. But then what I'm going to do is watch from home, continue to file my open records request, and put everything out online, which I know you don't want. But I told you, I came to you 3 years ago. I went to the police department. I went to the district attorney's office. I went to the AG's office. The AG's office gave me civil attorneys' names. They said, you have information, you have a case. I'm like, that's not what I'm interested in. I don't want to file a civil suit because my rights are being violated. I come here every month just to be on the record and have whoever's writing the minutes lawfully do what he's supposed to do and make note of that. And that's fine. Do you want me to just stop coming? Because I will, but then I'm left with no other avenue but to call that civil attorney in Philadelphia and say, a year and a half. What am I supposed to do? I don't know what I'm supposed to do.
You called me a criminal. The board, I'm done. I'm done. You're violating our 2 resolutions.
Well, it's a pattern. For 3 years it's been a pattern, and I can start with the attorney and hand him the letter that Ms. Camp had to write. So I might have to do that.
Please. Thank you.
I just want to say,
I'm really sorry. I'm really sorry.
I just want to say, just regarding Mr. Rivera, what you were saying before, and I get what you're saying also, Ms. Camp, about the attorney-client privilege, but just for the perception of it, if we're just deciding something as whether or not we should take the time or whether we should just vote on this here, I think that's something perhaps that we can discuss in the open.
But that's not what you did not hear everything I said to Robin.
That's exactly the point. I didn't hear everything.
Well, I apologize for that.
And I think everyone should. If I don't hear it, and they have a problem hearing it. So I'm just saying, just for perception purposes, not legal arguments here.
It was something that I felt that the chairperson should be advised about in making a decision.
Just think it would be good because it was kind of awkward. And it isn't perceived too well, obviously, but I mean, I'm just speaking from my own.
Well, the next time I will ask that we leave the room and go to the room.
And then we can make that announcement.
It's not really an executive session, though. That's the point.
Right.
The Sunshine Law has specific parameters for what executive session topics can be.
Totally.
You're allowed to have fine confidential communication.
As far as I knew, the only thing that was up for discussion at that point was whether or not we were going to make that decision or whether we were going to wait.
Well, that's basically what we were talking about, the options.
So, I mean, I don't think that's something that we necessarily have to talk about, attorney-client privilege. I think that's something that we can talk about.
I think the technical way of how this should proceed can be discussed off the record, one-on-one, rather than in public.
No, I don't think so. I don't
think
agree
so.
with that at all. And I think as a member of the board, I have a right to say that opinion. I just think that something like that, because where does it end? If we're going to start having these type of discussions in huddles without having the people listen, where does it end? This was
Well,
something that
when it's something that should be confidential communication and really should only be shared
then
with
we
the
should,
board.
let's make that announcement and do your suggestion of saying, hey, look, this is where the board's at a point right now where there's a legal thing that came up and cross that bridge when we get there.
So noted.
That's all.
Persistent.
Sure. Have to follow that procedure.
Okay, any additional public comment? All
One
right.
more.
Pardon?
Just one more.
Okay, you can just say it from your seat.
I'm sorry?
You can say it from your seat.
Yeah. That's exactly the point Mr. Piali made. There were only 1, 2, 3 persons who were privy to that conversation. This is an open meeting. Understand, I'm not a lawyer, but I have been in enough of these and enough litigation to understand he's entitled to know what's going on, she's entitled to know what's going on, and we are entitled to know what's going on. So you guys have violated the law. That's the sad part of it is Ms. Kemp is a very competent solicitor.
Sir, I disagree with you.
I know her for almost 20 years in my own township. She's very competent. She cannot make a rookie mistake like this. Thank you.
Okay.
I would like to think it's just a misunderstanding and we can improve as we go on, Mr. Rivera. I don't want to talk about any violations of the law. I think these things happen. Let's just move on from that.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, we're officially adjourned.
Make
Or not even motion. Motion. I need a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
And a second. All right, good night, everybody.